This is Miss Anna, and I want to start by saying something clearly before anything else in this video lands the wrong way. This is not an attack. This is not a sermon. This is not a woman standing in judgment over other women's choices with a Bible in one hand and a gavel in the other. I do not operate that way, and I never will. What this is an honest conversation. The kind that used to happen between older women and younger ones before we decided that honesty was cruelty and that the most loving thing you could do for a woman was to tell her that every choice she makes is equally valid and equally wise and equally likely to produce the life she actually wants. That is not love. That is abandonment dressed as support. So I am going to say the things that the women in your life who actually care about you should have said earlier. Not to shame you, not to make you feel irredeemable, but because the women who are heading toward 35 and beyond deserve accurate information about what is waiting for them on the other side of the choices they are making right now. And accuracy in this particular conversation has been in very short supply. Let me start with what nobody wants to name directly. Promiscuity, for the purposes of this conversation, means a pattern, not a moment, not a difficult season, not the year after a painful divorce when you were figuring yourself out and made choices you would make differently now. A pattern, a sustained, chosen approach to intimacy that treats it as recreation, as a commodity, as something that costs nothing to give and nothing to receive and carries no weight from one encounter to the next. That is the pattern I am talking about. And the reason I am being specific is because I want you to be honest with yourself about whether this conversation is for you. Because if it is, the defensiveness you already feel rising is information, not a reason to click away. Information. The things that make us most defensive are usually the things that have the most truth in them for us specifically. So stay. What I am about to say matters more if it is uncomfortable than if it is not. The first thing that happens is not what most people expect. Most women who engage in this pattern expect the consequences, if they think about consequences at all, to be social, reputation, judgment, the way certain people look at them or speak about them, or whether certain men take them seriously. Those things are real, but they are not the primary consequence. The primary consequence is internal, and it builds so slowly that most women do not see it happening until they are standing somewhere they never intended to arrive. Here is what happens inside a woman who has moved through a sustained pattern of casual intimacy over a long period of time. She loses the ability to feel the full weight of connection, not all at once, gradually, the way you lose sensitivity in a nerve that has been compressed for too long. Each encounter that was supposed to mean nothing trained her nervous system to treat intimacy as something that means nothing. And the nervous system is an obedient student. It learns exactly what it is taught. So by the time she meets a man she actually wants to connect with, a man she genuinely wants to build something with, something is different. The depth that intimacy is supposed to produce does not quite arrive. The emotional gravity that is supposed to accompany genuine vulnerability has been lightened by repetition until it barely registers. She feels it as a vague flatness, an inability to access the tenderness she can intellectually identify but cannot quite reach. She wants to feel more than she feels. She wonders why she cannot seem to fall fully, why men she genuinely likes remain somehow at a distance, even when she is trying to close it. She does not always connect this to the pattern. She connects it to the man, to her anxiety, to her past trauma, to anything except the years of training she gave her own capacity for connection. That is the first consequence. And it arrives quietly, long before 35, building invisibly until the moment she needs her full capacity for intimacy and discovers she has been making withdrawals from an account she forgot, was finite. The second thing that happens is a shift in what she is able to offer and what she is able to receive. There is a quality that men who are serious about building something are looking for. It is not purity in the naive sense. It is not a number or a history that can be erased. It is something subtler and more important than either of those things. It is settledness. A woman who is settled in herself, who has a clear relationship with her own worth that is not dependent on male attention or validation or the next encounter confirming that she is still desirable. A woman who brings a quality of presence to a relationship that feels grounded rather than restless. That settledness is very difficult to manufacture. It is either present or it is not, and a sustained pattern of casual intimacy tends to work against it in a specific way. Because the pattern is, at its core, an attention economy. Each new encounter is a fresh confirmation that she is wanted. And when the confirmation becomes the mechanism by which she feels her own value, the absence of confirmation becomes intolerable. She needs the next one to feel what she felt after the last one. And the man who wants to give her something lasting cannot compete with the chemistry of novelty. So, she does not choose him, or she chooses him and leaves when the novelty fades, or she stays and is restless in a way neither of them can fully explain. After 35, this dynamic becomes harder to sustain for reasons that are simply biological and social and true, regardless of how they make anyone feel. The options that were plentiful at 25 begin to thin. The encounters that produce the confirmation become less frequent, and the gaps between them longer. And the woman who built her sense of value on a foundation of being consistently chosen begins to experience something she does not have the framework to process. Because nobody prepared her for this. They told her to enjoy her freedom. They told her that her choices were her own, and the consequences were a myth invented by people who wanted to control her. They told her everything except the truth. The truth is that what you practice, you become. And a woman who practiced being chosen casually becomes very good at being chosen casually and very poorly equipped for the thing she actually wanted all along. The third thing that happens is loneliness of a specific kind. Not the ordinary loneliness of being alone on a Friday night. Not the temporary ache of not having a partner in this particular season. A deeper loneliness. The loneliness of being known by many people in a very specific way and genuinely known by almost no one. Intimacy, real intimacy, requires sustained presence. It requires someone who has seen you across enough time and enough ordinary moments to have built an accurate picture of who you are. Not who you are for an evening, who you are when you are tired and uncertain and not performing anything for anyone. The pattern of casual intimacy does not produce that. By design, the encounters are self-contained. The connection, such as it is, exists in a sealed compartment that does not open into anything larger, and the woman moves on, and the man moves on, and both of them remain fundamentally unknown to each other. Do that for long enough, and you develop a specific relationship with your own inner life. You become private in a way that protects you in the short term and isolates you in the long term. The walls that kept the casual encounters from costing too much also keep the genuine ones from getting close enough to matter. After 35, when the pattern has run long enough, she sits inside a life that looks full from the outside. Experiences, stories, a social presence that reads as confident and self-possessed and more than fine. And she is lonely in a way she cannot explain to the people around her because explaining it would require admitting things she is not ready to admit. That the freedom she was celebrating was also a flight, that some of what she called living was actually avoiding, that the connection she was getting was a substitute for the connection she actually needed, and the substitution worked well enough to keep her from noticing until it stopped working. has a way of stopping things from working. The fourth thing that happens involves the body. And I am going to say this plainly because it is true. The biological conversation is not a punishment. It is not something invented to make women feel bad about their choices. It is simply real. And pretending it is not real because it is inconvenient is not feminism. It is negligence. A woman who reaches her mid-30s having spent her prime years in a pattern of casual intimacy rather than building towards something lasting is now navigating the dating landscape with less biological time than she started with. That is not an opinion. That is a fact that exists regardless of how anyone feels about it. The men she now wants, the ones who are established and emotionally mature and genuinely ready to build something, have options. They have always had options. And while she was in her pattern, many of those men were building lives with women who were available for building. Women who decided earlier that what they wanted was the thing, not the substitute for the thing. She arrives at the conversation later with more history than she wanted to bring, with a body clock that has opinions, with an emotional landscape that is more complicated than it needed to be, and she is now trying to attract and hold the serious attention of men who were serious earlier and found women who were ready to meet them there. This is not irreversible. I want to say that clearly. It is not over. It is not a sentence. Women have built beautiful marriages and families after this point, and they have done it genuinely. Not as a consolation prize, but as a real and full life. But it is harder, meaningfully harder. And the woman who was told it would not be harder, that the timing was entirely flexible, that biology was a construct and she had all the time she needed, was lied to by people who confused empowerment with the removal of accurate information. Accurate information is empowering. Comfortable lies are not. The fifth thing that happens is a reckoning with the story she told herself. Every woman in this pattern has a story, a framework that made the pattern make sense, that gave it meaning and protected her from the questions that would have interrupted it. Maybe the story was about freedom, about refusing to be constrained by expectations built for a different generation, about owning her sexuality and her choices in a way that her mother's generation could not. Maybe the story was about not being ready, about needing more time to find herself before she could be found by someone else, about the work she needed to do before she was prepared to show up fully in something real. Maybe the story was about the men, about how none of them were right, about how she had standards and she was not going to lower them, and the fact that no one she met ever quite measured up was evidence of her discernment rather than evidence of anything else. These stories are not always lies. There is often real truth in them, but they are also often armor. And after 35, when the pattern has run its course and she is sitting with the life it produced, the armor gets heavy, the reckoning is quiet. It does not always announce itself dramatically. It arrives in ordinary moments, at weddings, where she is genuinely happy for the people getting married and also aware of something she cannot name. At dinners with coupled friends where she performs being fine, with a skill that has gotten very good with practice. At night, in a home that belongs entirely to her, with the freedom she was celebrating still technically intact. She sits with the story and she turns it over and she starts to see the seams, the places where what she told herself and what she actually felt did not quite match. The choices she called liberation that were also flights from something she was afraid to want openly. That reckoning is not comfortable, but it is useful. It is the beginning of building something different. And the women who are willing to have it honestly, without excusing themselves too quickly or condemning themselves too harshly, are the ones who come out the other side of it with something real. Here is what I want every woman watching this to hear before she decides how to receive it. If this conversation found you early, Before the pattern is long and the ground has shifted, you are holding something valuable right now. The ability to make a different calculation while the calculation still has room to change. Not to panic, not to make desperate decisions driven by fear, but to be honest with yourself about what you actually want and whether what you are doing right now is moving you toward it or away from it. If this conversation found you in the middle, it is not too late to change the trajectory. Not by performing a sudden transformation that does not reflect anything real, by making genuine, daily choices about what you are building and who you are becoming. Trajectory changes slowly, but it changes. And if this conversation found you on the other side of it, sitting with the life the pattern produced and wondering what comes next, I want you to know that the reckoning I described is not the end. It is the beginning of the only honest starting point available to you. And honest starting points, however uncomfortable, are the only ones that lead anywhere worth going. The conversation nobody wanted to have with you, the one that would have told you the truth about what this pattern produces, should have happened earlier. The women who should have said it did not say it because saying it was uncomfortable and they chose your comfort over your clarity. I chose differently, not because I am standing in judgment over you, because I believe that women who have full and accurate information about the consequences of their choices are capable of making better ones. And the women who were never given that information deserved better than what they got. You deserve the truth earlier than this. Consider this better late than never. This is Miss Anna, and I will be back with more of what nobody else will say. Subscribe if you are ready to keep hearing it.